Still on your assignment, we looked at the blood. I'll give you a quick overview. So we said the blood is broken down into three main parts. So we've got the red blood cells, the white blood cells, and the platelets. Okay? The red blood cells we picked up that mainly for oxygen and carbon dioxide. They transport oxygen, carbon dioxide. And then when you look at a red blood cell, the red pigment, the oxygen and carbon dioxide bind to the red pigment called the hemoglobin. So when the oxygen binds to the red blood cell, it becomes oxy. Oxyhemoglobin. And then when the oxygen is given out and utilized by the cells for cellular respiration, the oxygen becomes deficient, the red blood cell becomes deficient of oxygen. So that oxygen, which is deficient, is said that there will be more carbon dioxide present. So the red blood cell then becomes deoxyhemoglobin. Now, the structure of the red blood cell, when you look at the structure of the red blood cell in textbooks, the textbooks describes the structure as biconcave. Is biconcave in nature. So it's got a shape like this. So biconcave. So there's a dent here and there's a dent there. So that's the structure of the red blood cells. It's biconcave in nature. It has no nucleus. So the red blood cell has no nucleus. So this again goes to confirm that the red blood cell doesn't replicate, it doesn't copy itself, unlike the traditional cells we have in our tissues and parts of the body. The red blood cells wouldn't go through the process of mitosis. So it's biconcave in shape, it has no nucleus. The red blood cell has a large surface area. The significance of the red blood cell having a large surface area so that it can carry, it's got a maximum ability or capacity to carry the oxygen to all parts of the body. Okay, so no nucleus. The simple reason is that it doesn't replicate itself, doesn't copy itself. It's biconcave in shape, and it's got a very large surface area to transport maximum capacity of oxygen to all parts of the body. So that's a red blood cell. And as its main role is to take out oxygen to all parts of the tissues and then to bring out unwanted carbon dioxide to the lung so that we exhale. The white blood cell we saw last time, they are mainly for the body's natural immune system for immunity. So white blood cells mainly immunity. So to defend the body against microbes. So they defend against, I'll say, foreign invaders. And the foreign invaders could be microbes, for example, microbes, parasites. So that's the kind of defense they provide for the body. Then we come to the platelets. The platelets, again, they play an active role in blood clotting. Very, very key, because part of your assignment will be linked to, I'll go to it, a case study on an injury where the person's body must respond to help the medical team treat that. So blood clotting is very, very important. So platelets. Mainly for blood. Clotting. Then we touch on the functions of the blood. It's very, very important because you will be writing on this in your assignment. So it's important to know the functions of the blood. So if I went back to my PowerPoint I was using, so it's very important to link the functions of the blood to these points here. Regulation of, and then transport of, and then protection. Now, the blood helps to regulate water and heat. Helps to regulate water and heat. So heat is evenly distributed. The blood ensures that that is happening, and then if or when the issue of heat becomes a problem, then the body also responds as much as it can. Water is also, the water content is also controlled. So sometimes with the help of the endocrine system and the kidneys, we either retain water or we expel water, depending on the concentration of water in the body. Then transportation. Our blood transports the nutrients from the food we ingest. So after digestion, the nutrients which the body needs ends up in the bloodstream, and then it is transported to all parts of the body for the body to utilize. Gases such as carbon dioxide, oxygen are also found in the blood. Water, ions, it's a long list, hormones, enzymes. The enzymes responsible for digestion, hormones responsible for, from the endocrine system, hormonal activities. And then waste products, which the body doesn't need, are also carried. And then sometimes we sweat, some of them, sometimes it comes through the feces, and sometimes we excrete them with the help of the kidneys, and they come out as urine. And then we've seen how the white blood cells play an important role in protection. So the white blood cells, part of the blood, plays the role of protecting the body against infection, foreign invaders. And as I said, be very, very careful with this. You will write on this. I've given you the lead. Use this as a platform. Read more and expand on this. Okay, that is the protection bit. the transport bit and the regulation bit. So we saw that last time. Then we said that this blood, when we see the blood, let me go back. When we see the blood, we see just a blood. But the blood that we see, once it goes through centrifuge, one is spun. If someone took a blood sample or a blood test, and the scientists are trying to analyze what the issues are with this particular patient, the blood is spun and then it separates the foreign elements from the plasma. So there's part of the blood called a plasma. Very, very important. It will be in your test. It is already in your test. The plasma plays an important role. It contains about 95% plus of water. So it has a lot of water within it. Apart from the water, it's got protein components in it. It's got other defense mechanisms in it as well to defend the body. But when we look at the water component of the plasma, then we pause and say to ourselves, this water component of the plasma, what role does it play? It helps to make the entire blood fluid. It increases the fluidity of the blood, the flow of the blood. So that's why it's important for us to drink the recommended volume of water in a typical day. And the water also helps to soluble nutrients which are soluble in water, to be able to dissolve in the blood. And remember, the dissolution of the nutrients will then enable the blood to distribute those nutrients to all parts of the body. So there's more to do with the plasma. So find time to research more on the plasma and then see how the plasma helps the body to function or perform. So part of the assignment is to talk about the formation of the blood. Where is it formed? Where is it formed? It is formed in our stem cells. It is formed in our stem cells, the pluripotent stem cells. That is where the formation starts. Later on, I'm going to print this flow chart for you. It's not complicated, but it entails quite a bit. So it starts from the pluripotent stem cells, and then it splits into what we call the myeloid cells and then the lymphoid cells. And then from the myeloid cells, we look at the red blood cell, it comes to a point where we call the erythroblast. And then the formation starts from there. And a nucleus is lost. So at the beginning of the formation of the red blood cell, there exists a nucleus. But at a certain point along its journey, it loses the nucleus. And when the nucleus is lost, our red blood cell is formed. And then that is what helps us to do all sorts. From the same pluripotent stem cells, the white blood cells are derived. We'll come to that later. So we don't only form the red blood cells from the stem cells, we form the white blood cells also from the stem cells. Very, very key. And you would, as I'll give you a copy of this, you may end up sketching this yourself, because you can't do a copy and paste. So when the time comes in your producing your assignment, you need to mention the key bits here in your assignment. That is where the red blood cells are formed. And then when we go on, so 1.1, the major components, we look at the major components, the formation of the red blood cells and how they mature. So in the end, they mature as red blood cells once they go through these processes. But it must start from the stem cell. Then it goes on with blood clotting and then the white blood cells. But before we get to the white blood cells, we talk about the recycling. Again, be careful. The reason why I'm going through these things again is that you will need them. Without them, you can't do your assignments. So how are they recycled? How does the recycling take place? For a blood to recycle, it lasts for 120 days. So we have the red blood cell, which breaks down into the globin and the heme. That's the first breakdown. Breaks down to the globin and the heme. I'll go a summary here, different from what I shared last time. Yeah, very, very, very important. So it goes down into the globin and the heme. And then the bit we need to really pick up here is that this globin is a protein component. And the heme is the iron part of the blood. The globin in the end becomes amino acids. Which is utilized as part of protein synthesis in the body. The heme, first and foremost, becomes an ion. If you look at the flow chart here, there's a breakdown, the globin, the heme, and then it becomes, it breaks down to biliverdin. The iron component is there. The iron is stored in the liver or the spleen. It links up with transferrin and is stored as ferritin in the liver. And then when it's needed, it comes out again. And then it is utilized and matures in the bone marrow of the cells. And the red blood cells comes into circulation. It lasts for 120 days. But the key point here is that when this iron gets into the liver and it is released back as iron, that iron ends up in the bone marrow. Okay? The iron is so useful to the body that it is not eliminated, it is not excreted, it is not expelled. So it's temporarily stored in the liver. Then from the liver, it is released into the bone marrow. And then at that point, it's gone. So vitamin B12 and other bits in the bone marrow. Research more on this. And then the new red blood cells are formed and they are put into circulation. Whilst they are in circulation, they last for approximately 120 days. So that is the first part of the iron. Then the second part of the iron, if you look at this flow chart here, the waste, eventually the bit which we have to really pick up is that it eventually comes out as bilirubin, biliverdin, bilirubin. They're all there. I'll try to print this for you as well. But finally, it comes out as bilirubin, which goes through the kidneys, and then we excrete through the urine. And then some are also excreted through the small intestines. They go through the bowel, small intestines, and then we excrete them out of the body. But the key point here is that the iron is useful. The unuseful ones are excreted, and then the cycle continues. Okay, that's how far we go to last time. Now, how does, then the next part is, before I was going to go to the blood clotting. The next one is the white blood cells. What role do they play your assignment brief says that we will write on at least 5 white blood cells. So I'll quickly go through the 5 with us, and then we'll look at the major roles of those white blood cells. And then we look at blood clotting. Sorry about the light. And so these are the major white blood cells we'll be looking at. We'll be looking at the neutrophils, the lymphocytes, the monocytes, the eosinophils, and the basophils. These are the 5 major ones everyone here will write about. So focus your research on this. I'm going to give you a breakdown of what each of them does. Okay, so I'm targeting your assignment brief because very soon, the half term is coming. So I'm targeting assignment brief and giving you a guide as to how to research to meet the requirements of assignment brief. So we've got a neutrophil, we've got a lymphocyte, we've got a monocyte, we've got a eosinophil, and we've got a basophil. So you'll be writing on this. But you have to really be careful about what your brief says. Your brief says that distinguish between the structure and functions. So we are going to distinguish between how the structure looks like and their respective functions. Okay? So I'll go through them briefly, one at a time with you, to pick up the structure and the functions. Okay, so we are on a neutrophil. It's got a multi-lobed nucleus. But the main bit there is this. Now, again, your textbook will talk about this, but it says that it responds chemotactically to various stimuli. And especially the focus on bacteria membrane. And when you read further, the key point there is phagocytosis. So what it does, I'll give you a general, I'm trying to give you an overview. So there's a key word there. You see chemotatically. Okay? We must really understand. It's always important to understand when we read. So, and then they've got phagocytosis. Again, take your time, look at the words, look within your textbook, search the meaning. Don't just read, search the meaning. We've got phagocytosis. Now let me explain what these two things are. Number one, and then it talks about chemotactically. I'm going to explain this. Phagocytosis, I'll explain. Then it mentions bacteria. So the neutrophil, its function is to attack a microbe, but specifically a bacteria. So there's a bacteria. So let's imagine a situation where the body has been invaded by bacteria. We are not about masses. When it becomes a mass invasion, then we need hospital intervention where we are giving antibiotics. But we're talking about a mild invasion. Even if it's a massive invasion, it starts. But then the body becomes overwhelmed. So the person ends up in hospital and then they get external help. So if this is a bacteria which has entered the body, the neutrophil picks that up. The body system picks up that, hold on, a foreign body has entered. This foreign object, this microbe, must be eliminated. So where is the chemotactically coming in from? And where is the phagocytosis coming in from? Phagocytosis is where the neutrophil engulfs. So here is engulfing. It engulfs the microbe. So if you imagine this as the microbe, which has entered, and then the neutrophil will have to shape. It is about its shape will change, and then it will engulf it. It will engulf the microbe. But then when it engulfs the microbe, the engulfing doesn't stop there. There's a reason why the microbe was engulfed. And the purpose of the engulfing is that the neutrophil will then inject. It will inject chemicals. That's why the chemotactically is coming in. It will inject chemicals into the microbe. Some of your textbooks refer to it as the microbe becomes digested. So the essence of the digestion of the microbe is to make it incapable. So when it injects into the microbe becomes inactive, and then it is removed from the body. And then the person becomes okay. If it's a mild infection, then the person is fine. So when you're reading and you came across phagocytosis, think of the microbe surrounding, going round. It engulfs. If this is a microbe, to engulf the microbe. And it can only apply its chemicals when it has surrounded it. Okay? And then it will then release the chemical into the microbe, makes it inactive so that it doesn't really destroy. Because they multiply exponentially, very, very fast. We can link it to the coronavirus. Look at the exponential growth of the virus now. There's a mathematical aspect, but I'm not going to go there. So it multiplies exponentially. So the rate of infection goes very, very fast. Yes?
Talking about the phagocytosis, so in the time of engulfment, it doesn't matter if the particles are large or small.
Okay, when it comes to a bacteria, it is very, very small. So here we're not talking about all particles, but we're talking about a bacteria. The size of a bacteria is a microorganism, so it's very, very small. Parasites are slightly larger. Viruses are smaller than bacteria. At present, we are looking at a microorganism, which the eye cannot even see. Can you see where we are going with this now? And that microorganism, which is a bacteria, in case it has invaded the body, then the process of phagocytosis will take place. And then the release of the chemicals coming it breaks the coating off. Coronavirus, only hand washing, soap, will break it off, because the outer coating of the coronavirus is a lipid. So ordinary soap will dissolve the virus, and then it's off the hands. So here, the chemicals will dissolve the coating, and then the textbook says it becomes digested, and then it is expelled from the body. So that is what a neutrophil does. So when you're writing about the white blood cells and you are researching or you are adding more research to neutrophils, think of bacteria, think of chemotactically chemicals, linked to chemicals or digestive juices, and then the concept of phagocytosis, where the microbe is engulfed. Okay, so the eosinophil, another white blood cell. You can see I'm skipping some of the functions, what's called the structures. I'm going straight to the point. Again, here is a chemotatic response. You read it. To complement antibodies and histamine. Here, very, very careful. They are active against parasites. It's not talking about bacteria, but they are active against parasites. Parasites are slightly bigger. So the antibodies, don't worry, the antibodies fight the infection. All right? But here, because of parasites, then it produces histamine. We have antihistamine. Hay fever, antihistamine, yes. So, and then the issue of histamine comes in, and then they attack the parasites. A parasite, example, like the malaria plasmodium parasite. Okay, when we get attacked by parasites such as plasmodium parasites, then the eosinophil may act and come into action. So that is the eosinophil, and that is the second white blood cell. And as you are taking down the notes and as you are looking at this, remind yourself that you will be writing about the structure and you will be writing about the functions. So that is what it does. Again, there's a chemotatic response there as well. So the issue of chemicals are released to fight. This time, the parasite is being fought at this point. The basophil. The basophils, during allergic reactions. So you can see that every white blood cell we have in our body has a specific role. So when we get allergic, some people are allergic to pollen, some people are allergic to nuts, you get the point now? Some people are allergic to milk. We've got so many allergies. Wheat, it's a long list. So they respond to allergic reactions, and then they secrete a large amount of heparin, anticoagulant, and then they also secrete histamine, okay, to help. They then again look at constriction of the blood vessels and then bronchi. So be careful when you're doing your research. It is mainly for allergic reactions. It secretes heparin, again, to stop the blood coagulating, and then it secretes histamine. The histamine helps with constriction. May I ask a quick question when you've written this? Why do you think constriction is so important at this stage? Try not to write too much. Try to understand. Now, we are talking about allergic reactions, and we are talking about constriction here of the blood vessels. Why do you think constriction is so important in the life of a patient who is undergoing allergic reaction?
Stop it spreading.
to stop it spreading. To stop it spreading.
The infection, yeah. So that's what she's saying. To prevent, I think when you say constriction, you mean makes it come together a bit.
Yeah, it constricts.
Yeah.
So the diameter. If we started with a larger diameter, when it constricts, it kind of presses down, isn't it?
Okay.
Now, at this point, it depends. Allergic reactions and its consequences on the patient. Then anticoagulation to stop clotting.
Yeah.
Right? Because allergic reaction comes with so many cascading effects. And it gets to a certain point, the patient may be gasping for air. So the essence of the constriction is to increase the blood flow. Remember, the blood carries oxygen to supply this person, because sometimes the situation is so bad that you see some of them breathing from their mouths. They are gasping. So at this point in the patient's life, constriction helps to pump more blood, to supply more oxygen, to sustain them, to keep them alive. And then again, the heparin stops any blood clotting, because that will then also compound the whole situation. So the basophils play a very, very, very important role in patients during allergic reactions. Sometimes in severe cases, now we're talking about mild cases. In severe cases, sadly, some patients are lost. In severe cases, some patients are lost. So it doesn't mean because we know we are basophil within the body system, when we are told not to eat something, we'll go and eat it. But it acts, sometimes it's able to save life as well. That is its role, that is its function. But in severe cases where the allergic reaction is overwhelming, then sometimes if the person doesn't get hospital attention, then it can become, or it may become fatal. So that is the basophil. The lymphocytes. There are three types, very, very important. There are three types, again, so in your research, you see the T, you see the B, you see the natural killers. We all have them. Every single one of us, we have them. There are three major lymphocytes. There's a T, there's a B, there's a natural. So remind yourself that when you are researching, research what a T does, research what a B does, and then research what a natural killer does. There's a B, there's a T, there's a natural killer. Still a white blood cell. But what role do they play? How do they help us? Is the next question. Because of the sales assignments, I know some of you haven't started reading yet. But it's important you start reading and then link this to the task. Let me give you the T lymphocytes. It says it destroys invading cells or cancer cells by direct contact. So that's what they do. So invading cells or cancer cells directly. So that is what they do. And please read more on this. Don't put this in your assignment. You put this in your assignment, you haven't done anything. It's just, I know some of you may end up just putting this, that's not enough. Go and read, go and research. So it destroys the cancer cells.
What's apoptosis?
Yeah, write it down, underline it, and go and research.
Yeah, so we hear a lot of grammar, isn't it? And I don't understand
Good.
the grammar.
Yeah, usually it's all in the Ross and Wilson. Which of them don't you understand?
The coagulation,
Yeah, coagulation is to do with clotting.
clotting.
Yeah, there's a lot of keywords on this. Yeah, so try to read and try to get the facts. And then the B lymphocytes, they secrete antibodies. The B lymphocytes, they secrete antibodies. And very, very importantly, they precipitate in memory immunity. I will explain that in a minute. Write this down and then I will explain it. So this part, a lot of us are familiar with. But then let me talk about antibodies before we move on. When we say an antibody, happiness, we're talking about grammar.
Yeah.
So when we talk of antibodies, when do antibodies come in?
Infection.
The moment there's an infection, the antibodies come in. And the role of the antibody is to fight the infection. Okay? So antibodies come in. So the B lymphocytes, mainly production and secretion of antibodies. But in addition to providing and secreting antibodies, there's a statement there which talks about memory immunity. Memory immunity. Most of us have it. Now, when we talk about memory immunity, let's break it down. Memory. When something is in our memory, it is stored. We can recall from the memory. So your home phone number, your postcode, is in your memory.
Yeah.
So you can easily recall your post. You fill a form, you recall your postcode, you recall your home address, because it is in the memory. Now, sometimes, again, some of us can recall or remember this. Sometimes we are giving vaccinations. So someone or we may have had a vaccine against, let's say, yellow fever. All right. So once somebody is vaccinated against yellow fever, all right, the body is protected against yellow fever. So if this person travels to a yellow fever prone country or region, or another cholera is another one. So when this vaccination is given to people and they travel and they encounter a yellow fever or a cholera, and maybe through water or food, and it gets into their body, the system will recall. Because imagine your child, taking your child for vaccination. To you, the mother, you've done the vaccination. Okay? So this child is, let's say, vaccinated against chicken pox. You have done your vaccination, and this child goes to school. In class with their classmates, the child is there playing, and then one of the classmates has chicken pox. And this child of yours who has had the vaccination played with this child who had a chicken pox. Now, because the child has been vaccinated against chicken pox, if by accident that chicken pox microbe enters the vaccinated child, the memory immunity of the child will kick in. Ooh, this is chicken pox coming. The antibodies, naturally inbuilt, will begin to fight the chicken pox. Most times, the child is able to combat the chicken pox. Or even if it's going to attack it at all, it will be very, very minimal because of the memory immunity. Compare it to another child who hasn't had a vaccination at all. Can you see the link now?
Yes.
Who will be prone to a full attack. But because this child in year 2, year 3, whatever year, has had a chickenpox vaccination, they are then considered as immune. And sometimes they give boosters. So the child gets the vaccination, and then they are told, come for a booster. The parents here will know this. And the booster is to ensure that the memory is brought up to scratch.
Is that the same as when you naturally catch, say, chickenpox as well, then your body is immune to it?
When you naturally catch the
Yeah.
chickenpox and you recover,
Then your body's immune.
then it's in the memory. Yeah, then it's the memory. Then the parent. So you can see how all these blood cells, all these white blood cells are in our body. So sometimes we are told, eat well, eat a balanced diet. It's for a reason. Then the body system helps to build this up. Natural killers. So we've got a B, we've got a T, we've got the natural killer, lymphocyte. And their principal is to attack infected cells and tumors. They go attack, destroy them as much as they can. Our body does it by itself. When it becomes overwhelmed, now we're talking about these are natural processes which takes place in the body. When the body system becomes overwhelmed, then external factors come in like chemotherapy. Can you see what radiotherapy? Yeah, but the natural killers try to do this and then get rid of diseased tissues or infected cells or tumors.
Why is it then that sometimes when people do need to go for chemotherapy, they end up feeling even sicker?
Because they don't only attack the disease tissue, but other parts of the system is also attacked. For a typical example, someone gets an infection, they are given antibiotics. Antibiotics is going to get rid of the infection, but the antibiotics will also get rid of the good bacteria in the body. So sometimes in the process, the person gets constipation. So chemotherapy also sometimes affects, it weakens the body because the body is exposed to radiation, which it's not used to. There are certain ones which specifically target the specific tissues, but even in the process, chemotherapy, where the chemical goes into the body.
So is it killing the natural killer cells then as well?
No, it even helps them to fight infection. But then there is targeting diseased tissues at that point. Radiation treatment, chemotherapy is targeting diseased tissues. And then now technology has advanced. Most times it targets more of the diseased tissues than the healthy tissues. So not all the healthy tissues are affected. Just a small percentage may be affected. So the person becomes a bit weaker. And then people end up losing hair and all of it. It comes with so many side effects. But if it's done well and the patient is lucky, they survive. It all depends on the intensity of the condition. So if the condition hasn't gone to a stage where the patient cannot be saved, then the radiation treatment and nuclear medicine can help the patient survive. So it's survival. The last one, the monocytes. So here is fungus bacteria. Very. Then you see the word phagocytosis comes in again. So the monocytes are mainly for fungal infection, bacteria. And they stimulate immune response. I can see the phagocytosis are coming in. So the bacteria must be digested. That is why phagocytosis comes in. That is why the chemical attractants are also coming in. That's the chemotactically is destroyed. So please target your research very well. Think of how these white blood cells function. Research on the structure. So far, I've skipped the structure.
Yeah. So
Yes.
what's the question?
Yes, I know some of you have turned your photocopy machines on. So
Just a question, sir.
before you ask your question, when someone talks about structure,
Yeah.
structure of, the structure of anything. If I try to describe the structure of this, right? Structure, easily, this is rectangular in shape. It's got a length, it's got a width. Now, when we are describing the structure of a microbe, has it got a diameter? Has it got a length? So you can't type your assignment on structure without talking about diameter, without talking about dimensions. Be very, very careful. So sometimes students write very, very well. You could tell that they've got everything there. But then when it says the structure and functions, the students give a detailed description of the functions. But then when you are marking and you look at the structure bit, then the structure bit is Latin. They've talked about the monocytes, the lymphocytes, but then where is the structure? Is it oval? Has it got a diameter? Has it got a length? What is it? X number of micrometers, X, make sure. If you are writing micrometer, please write micrometer. There's a difference between micrometer and millimeter. Be very, very careful. Okay? If you don't know where the unit of micro is, spell it, micrometer. That is fine. Then you are putting the units down. You are telling whoever is marking, this is the diameter, or this is the width, or this is the length. Most times you are marking the work and you see millimeter, and you say to yourself, where from the millimeter? So be careful with the dimensions, be careful with the structure. Make sure, I've skipped all the structures. Make sure you have the structure there intact. So we've looked at the white blood cells. We've looked at the blood itself, its structure, its functions. We've looked at the bit which comes with clotting, which is the platelets. I'll be going there in a minute. And then we've looked at the different white blood cells. And the encouragement is, please read and write well on the structures. Now, part of your assignment brief, be very, very careful. I've given the brief. I haven't given the brief yet. But there's a part of your assignment that is 2.1. It's on your 2.1. It's on assessment criteria I gave you. The 2.1, be careful here. It says, explain the process of hemostasis in a given scenario. Now, so now I'm going straight to your assignment. Straight to your assignment. So you will find yourself explaining hemostasis in your assignment. You haven't seen the assignment yet, but let me give you a snapshot of what it's about. Hemostasis is to do with bleeding and blood loss. Okay? So in this part of your assignment, there is this person who got injured. So number one, there was an injury. So 2.1. Let me leave it first. So 2.1 of your assignment brief, let me read it first for you. It says, explain the process of hemostasis in a given scenario. So there's an injury. And there's blood. Or fluid loss. And your task. So this person was taken to hospital. The person wasn't left there. The person was taken to hospital. But the question is, how would this person's body respond? They are in hospital. They are being seen to by the medical team. But how would this patient's body respond to help with the process of blood clotting? So the moment if we take this as a blood vessel with blood flowing, there is no cut, the blood is flowing. And then something happens, and then there was an opening. And then the patient begins to lose blood. The question is, how does the body, whoever it is, how does the body respond to stop blood loss? Because when you analyze blood loss, we operate on a certain volume of blood in our body system. If the volume of blood goes down, we are in crisis. All right? So sometimes when people go through certain types of surgeries or they sustain certain injuries, sometimes they are given blood because the blood volume should not fall below a certain level. So if someone sustains an injury and they start to lose blood, the body has got a mechanism. And the mechanism within the body is to say to itself, this plug must be sealed. There are certain injuries which will require hospital attention, where they will have to go into hospital for stitches and all the rest. Fine. But while the stitches and everything is taking place, or on the way to the hospital, the body itself try to see if they can stop the blood. And then sometimes, see, they put pressure on it, didn't they? They put pressure on it, they put a bandage on it to hold it. Because the moment the bandage or the pressure goes, then the tissues will begin to kind of come closer to seal the gap a little bit until the person gets into hospital, and then the medical team takes over from there.
Would that be the function of the platelet?
That is where the platelet comes in. That is where, so if you look back at what we're doing about the functions of the blood, or the components of the blood, we said the red blood cells, the white blood cells, the platelets. So the moment the platelets come in, they help to secure. But it is not only the platelets. We had one lesson where we're looking at connective tissues. And we said the blood had connective tissues within it. So that as the platelets are moving towards, they aggregate themselves, they move, they try to move, they kind of try to move. But the platelets alone, they start the process. But as they move, they drag other units within the blood along with them. And then together, they form the plug. The plug seals will form the fibrin mesh. It stays on top, and the blood stops flowing. So there's the next bit. Really go. Let's see if we can do this this time. But we haven't got a lot of time, but let me talk you through the steps quickly. Now, you have to be very, very careful how you respond to this. Because of time, I'll give you a snapshot of this because of time. But the key thing is be very, very, very careful. The key thing is, again, I'm targeting it. You need to write when you are responding to this task is that two things you must mention first. So yes, the platelets will play a role, but the body system itself will act in two ways. So there's a cut. The moment the cut appears, two things, the body will act in two ways. The first thing is intrinsic factors. These two things will come into action. Intrinsic factors, extrinsic factors. Intrinsic factors, extrinsic factors. And in the process, the intrinsic factors, again, it's all about reminding. The intrinsic factors is within the blood. A lot of students go wrong here, but the intrinsic factors is within the blood. The extrinsic factors is the tissues. Tissues at injury site. A lot of times when you are marking, students are unable to even mention intrinsic, extrinsic, and they are unable to explain the role intrinsic plays and the role extrinsic plays. So this is with respect to your assignment. So be careful when the time comes and you are answering AC 2.1, be careful how you approach it. So the platelets, you can see the platelets will fall here. The platelets, they are inside the blood. The fibrin, the fibrinogen, they are all inside the blood. But when we talk of extrinsic, we call them tissue factors. So when we have a cut and the system wants to prevent blood loss, there's a vascular spasm, the vasoconstriction of damaged blood vessels. Then the platelet plaque. So the platelet starts the process. But research on what else accompanies the process. As the platelets are moving, this is what I said, I stopped short. As the platelets are moving towards the injury site, certain agents are coming with it. So it is not only the platelets, so please do not just write it. They start the process. They recognize that there's a damaged blood vessels. So they initiate. So they move towards the injury site. But in the process of the movement, they drag certain components with them. Find out what the components are. So the platelet plaque formation comes coagulation or blood clotting. Then at that point, the blood will clot. But there's something very, very interesting when you are reading your textbook. The vasoconstriction comes in again. Very, very important. When we use the word constrict, constrict means to make narrow. So the vaso comes from vessel. So there's a blood vessel constriction. That is what your textbook tells you. The vasoconstriction is where the blood vessels constrict. Why is there a need for the blood vessels to contract at this point? This person has injured themselves. They are losing a lot of blood. Now, the blood vessels contract or constrict. Constriction may increase the pressure in the body system. So when the blood vessels contract, pressure is increased. If you were in your garden and you were watering plants with an ordinary, there are so many water holes now, but if you're watering your plants with an ordinary water hose, and let's say you were standing here and this is the end of your hose and there's a plant there, you want to, sometimes you press the end of your water hose and you see the water jetting. You constrict the diameter. So you constrict the diameter, you see the water jetting to the plant that you can't reach. Now, when the vessels contract or constrict, this patient is losing blood. Blood is carrying nutrients, blood is carrying oxygen. The blood flow is affected. Now, if the heart doesn't pump to increase the blood flow, the patient could be lost. And what will help the patient at that point is that the body system recognizes that blood fluid is being lost. So at this point, the vessels contract, they constrict. Why? To push more blood. Otherwise, systems will begin to shut down. Yes?
What's the process of thrombocytes in the whole of us? Thrombocytes.
And what is thrombosis? I know you work in the care field.
I think they kind of they have the function to play in the whole of the platelets coming together and
injuries.
forming a clot.
Yes. So what is your version of thrombosis?
I'm asking you, sir.
Yes, I can tell you, but it's a research. The moment I reveal too much, the assignment is like all done for you. So write it down. The senior matron has mentioned thrombocytes. So go and look for it and go and research it. And then we'll get to that point. But before we end, remember, the blood is a fluid, one thing. Two, the major components, the red blood cells, the white blood cells, the platelets. The red blood cells, gas exchange, oxygen, carbon dioxide. The white blood cells, the body's defense. The platelets, we just started on the clotting, we haven't finished. Helps with clotting, but note that the platelet doesn't take this role on its own. The platelet needs support to get this thing done. The white blood cells, we look at the 5 main white blood cells, all right? The main point there for the white blood cells is a structure. Ensure that when you are typing your assignments, you indicate the structure. Some of the white blood cells go through the process of phagocytosis. We've talked about what phagocytosis is. They engulf their microbe. They ingest chemicals into the microbe. And then the textbook says the microbe becomes digested. They become incapable of invading the body, so they are eliminated. Some of the white blood cells release histamine. Some of them fight parasites. Some of them release heparin. And the essence of the heparin is to stop coagulation. So there is a bit there to read. Then, after the white blood cells, we haven't finished, to look at how the body systems act in situations where there are injuries, where a vessel has been tampered with. And the key point there is that whenever we get an injury, it could be a minor injury or a major injury, but whenever a blood vessel is cut, your body, my body, goes through 2 processes. One of them is called the intrinsic. The other one is called the extrinsic. The intrinsic, inside. Intrinsic means that the activities, the action within the blood kicks off. So the blood itself, which is a connective tissue, will begin to send agents. So the agents are led by the platelets. So the platelets begin to move towards the injury site. And as the platelets move towards the injury, they form a plug, right? If something is leaking and you try to patch it up with it until you call a plumber, they form a pad, they form a plug there. But the plug will finally be made permanent and the blood loss is stopped when the fibrin mesh sits on. And then how do we get there? We get there by reminding ourselves that as the platelets move towards the injury site, the platelets drag along other components within the blood, and that falls under intrinsic factors. Then the extrinsic factors is strictly to do with the tissue. That's why sometimes when we get an injury, the exact site where the injury happened, the tissue becomes swollen. Check. Becomes slightly swollen. That is where the tissue factors come in. That they don't become swollen because they want to become swollen. It is part of the healing process. Okay? So we are going to stop here. The next time we meet up, we'll go slightly deeper into how the whole plugging system, which other chemicals, which other agents are involved in the blood clotting takes place. And then finally, we'll end up with blood groups. Because it is not every person who can donate blood to another person. So we'll come to why certain blood can be donated and why certain, it depends on the blood group the person is in. So we'll stop the lesson here. So more research. This half term you've got a lot to do. So read, and we've kind of given quite a bit on your assignment. I'm going to make sure your assignment is on Moodle so you can have a look at it and then begin to prepare for it. So have a great half term. Enjoy it.